Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. Brought to you by TwoWayRadioCenter.com, a Motorola value-added reseller. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to equipping the vigilant, those men and women who stand watch, keeping our houses of worship and places of faith safe. We believe church safety and security must be a ministry first, and have engaged servant leaders who continually strive for excellence and teams of motivated volunteers that are always training. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, Dr. James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, ChurchSafetyGuys.com, and on the original Church Security app. Download it today. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share with your ministry.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and I will be doing the broadcast on this Sunday evening and hosting it by myself, which is fine. Mike is actually off on vacation with his family for the evening, and so on a much needed, much deserved vacation. So it'll just be me and our guest tonight hanging out with you all. So if you haven't joined us in a while, or maybe this is your first time in listening, thanks, welcome. If you're picking us up later on YouTube or one of the podcast platforms, please feel free to click like and subscribe. And then we can actually alert you and send you information when we have new content, which typically we put it out, or we try and put stuff out every Sunday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that helps us be consistent. And other than, I think typically we try and take a few weeks off at the end of the year between Thanksgiving and the New Year. I think we're pretty consistently every Sunday, unless there's a holiday or something going on. And then we usually do rebroadcasts, or we'll play back popular episodes that folks have requested us to replay. So, but as always, we are honored and we'd love to help you in your ministry and your church. So if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to us through our website, which is churchsafetyguys.com, or you can reach out to us through the Church Security app, and you can download that on Google and also iOS platforms. That's a free app that has an enormous amount of church safety and security content that's available absolutely free, thanks to our sponsors and the folks that support our ministry. And also there's a few great things about the app. I'll just mention that real quick. If you're not familiar with that, we have quite a few different policy examples and suggestions in there. And then there's bits and pieces from our resources, from our books, devotional segments where you can download that and go over that with your team on Sunday if you need a devotional, and just a lot of great content for any team, whether you've decided to start one or whether your team's been running for a while. We're happy to offer that. So when you download it, you can bring that. Actually, if you go to our YouTube channel, there's actually a video that kind of walks you through all of that. But if you download it and then go in and registering is free as well. And that kind of puts you in a member section that offers a lot of extra content that's valuable and will be beneficial to you and your team. So other than that, I think we have, I'm trying to think through if there's something we haven't mentioned recently. I think last week we mentioned we have the new train book out with the ministry life cycle. And currently I am actually working on another new book that is going to be kind of mirroring some of the ministry life cycle, but it's going to be about leading ministry teams, and not specifically for church safety and security teams, but they can definitely find application with it. And if you're leading a team, you're not going to want to miss it, because it's got some great stuff. I had the opportunity to connect with a few different folks putting it together, and pastors and whatnot. And I think it's going to be another great resource. And hopefully, I'm thinking that will probably be out around Thanksgiving. So you're welcome to look for that, and hopefully that'll be a blessing to you and your team as well. But beyond that, we're still working on a few things. If you're listening to this broadcast and you're in Indiana or Ohio, one of our great friends is the Ohio Crime Prevention Association, and we've been doing some great things with them as far as house of worship conferences, one-day conferences, and that sort of thing. So if you're in those two states, and we're hopefully soon looking to expand up into Michigan and also Pennsylvania. But if you're at the time being, if you're in Ohio or Indiana, and you'd like us to come out and do a one-day presentation, please feel free to reach out, and we can try and see if we can make that happen. But I think right now we're looking at Indianapolis and Indiana, and trying to put something together for the next, I think October. We're looking for a church to host something out there. So those of you that have already reached out to us, thank you very much for doing that. And it's always helpful to have connections with churches, and to be able to connect with people. So other than that, I want to jump in, and I want to give us enough time, certainly enough time for the topic on this broadcast. But I will say that what we're talking about on this broadcast is pre-attack indicators and being prepared. And the reason that we're on this topic, or we picked this topic, is because you all asked for it. So typically when Mike and I talk about the scheduling and what we want to chat about for the season, and we usually have probably 13 or 14 episodes in our podcast season, and we go one season to another. But usually when we plan it, we kind of look as a whole at leadership, medical, tactical, and we try and touch base on at least every topic once through that season. And then we highlight it with different episodes, like Jared has the Real Stories of Church Safety and Security episode, where he has special guests on, or he talks about different things that he's had the opportunity to handle and deal with. So but honestly, 100%, if you're listening, we get our ideas and our content from your requests and from you guys. So whether you're listening today or another time, if there's a particular topic that you would like us to talk about, or maybe there's a topic related to church or house of worship safety that nobody's talking about, please feel free to reach out to us. And you can do that through our social media connections or our website, and just say, hey, I'd like you guys to cover medical response, or maybe it's campus safety or property safety, or whatever that is. And oftentimes we'll cover it ourselves, or we can try and connect with someone and bring them in for that discussion as well. So again, all of that is based on you guys, and our ministry is trying to support you and what you need. So please feel free to reach out to us if we can if we can help you at all with what you have going on. I know sometimes it's kind of crazy, and you get to a point where, if you're serving with, especially with church safety and security, if you're serving in that ministry within your church, sometimes it gets a little crazy with how busy, every Sunday it seems. But we are definitely appreciative of you all supporting our ministry and hanging out with us. And, it certainly couldn't happen without your support of, from purchasing our resources to, showing up for conferences and working with you guys. So that's really, the best part of this with Mike and I, is that we get the opportunity to actually, go visit other churches and talk to folks and meet new friends. And it's always a great thing. So, I'm going to go ahead and bring my guest in for this broadcast, and I know he will complement our discussion on pre-attack indicators and behaviors. So my guest on this broadcast is going to be Marco Galbraith with T4 Tactics. So let me bring him in here. Hey, Marco, thanks so much again for joining me. And
thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
I definitely appreciate you making your schedule available. Sometimes it's kind of crazy, you're it's like plates in the air. You're trying to juggle all of this stuff and get everybody's schedule to line up. And a lot of times at the last minute, stuff will shift and change, but we've got you here now. So
I'm in Lynchburg, Virginia. That's where I live. And I was in Baltimore, Maryland this morning at a church doing church training. So I just made it back. Just in the nick of time. No traffic issues on the way back, and here I am. Praise the Lord.
That's good stuff. So for those that don't know you, if you could just go through a quick bio, and how did you get into this with T4 Tactics and church safety?
Okay, so born and raised in Daytona Beach, Florida. I went to a private Christian school, grew up Christian my whole life, worked for the police department down there in the Daytona Beach area. And I had the opportunity, I had a really blessed career. Whatever I wanted to get into, I did. It was just everything fell into place for me. So I got to be the supervisor of the Special Investigations Unit, which was the major case unit. I was the commander of the hostage negotiation team. I was on the SWAT team for the majority of my career. I was in that major case unit, and we worked homicide investigations, undercover drugs. And so that's where I learned a lot about human behavior. And for 17 years of my police career, I was an adjunct instructor at the state college, which was also the police academy. So I was teaching tactical situations, constantly trying to learn and teach at the same time. And that's where I gained a lot of the knowledge. But I have a fascination with human behavior. That's why I started being a hostage negotiator. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight is human behavior. What makes people violent, and what pre-attack indicators do they put out? Humans will put out pre-attack indicators. As other humans, we need to pick up on that. They don't know they're putting them out, but there's clues and signals that the bad guy is going to put out that they don't know they're putting out. We got to be able to match that, to pick up on that.
Absolutely.
So I retired in 2007. My wife and I moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, and I immediately started T4 Tactics. We do concealed carry permit training, but what I enjoy doing, my passion, is I travel the country teaching active shooter response training to all types of facilities. We've done major food manufacturers, auto manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies that have a worldwide footprint, churches, universities, schools, colleges. It's been a blessing, and it keeps me busy. I enjoy what I do. I don't like to travel. You and I were talking off air. I don't like to drive, and I don't like to sit. So, but yeah, I really have a passion for what I do. I like taking an interest in people. I like letting, getting people to be safe. Not everybody thinks like people do, like law enforcement and military. And so I really enjoy seeing the look on their face when we deliver a product, not based on fear or paranoia, but just opening people's mind up to think and to realize that unfortunately these attacks are a reality. Attacks on churches are a reality.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's funny. It sounds like you retired from work to jump back into working.
I did. When we first moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, I started delivering saw blades for the huge. We have a lot of industry up here, and the huge sawmill saw blades. And I thought, out of police work, I'm going to get me a non-stressful job. And it wasn't
Sure.
challenging enough because my whole career, I'm way up here with adrenaline. And then I also thought, the Lord blessed me with a good career where I learned a lot. Why let that sit? Let me continue to share that knowledge and help people out, reduce injuries and save lives. That's what it's all about.
For sure. I think honestly, and I've done church safety now for probably officially in one way or the other for probably close to the last 20 years. And
Nice.
when I first started, and I don't do it professionally full time or anything like that. Honestly, I have another, actually I work for the Defense Department Monday through Friday, but I, when I first started, in my mind, one of the things that fascinated me was behaviors and how people act and react. And it seemed interesting to me because I've always been a big fan of, the behavioral analysis unit with the FBI. I've always been fascinated with the FBI and the study of human behavior. And so for me, looking at it, I guess when I first started in church safety, I would stand on the platform stage of the sanctuary and I'd look out into the church and I'd be like, you know what? I almost feel kind of like a Secret Service agent or an FBI agent because I'm, looking at people's faces, looking at their hands. But the more I started doing that and thinking about it, the more I thought, some people might think I'm kind of silly, but at the same time, I really learned a lot from just trying to glean from different artists, different folks out there like yourself, where it was like, wait a second, maybe this isn't as crazy and off the wall as I thought. Because, over the years, we've seen attacks on churches and houses of worship increase. And so now we actually, we do a similar set of training and consulting with different churches to try and help them get teams up and running and kind of go that route. But we talk to a lot of churches during the week that, that ask us that, like, well, how do you train on this? What do you look for? What are just some simple, basic practices to do that? So that's kind of how I got involved in it. I had a chance a few years ago. There was a conference up in Wisconsin, and one of the guest speakers that they had was an FBI special agent from Chicago, and he was part of the BAU, and he came in and he lectured for probably 4 or 5 hours. And I mean, I just sat there and I just kind of ate it up. And
there's a lot to take in with that. It's fascinating. I love that stuff.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so I just sat there, and as much as he talked and as much as he would share, and of course some of the stuff I guess that he shared, he was working on, current cases. So he was like, these are my notes. I can't let you copy them or take anything from that. But at the same time, I went up to him after and I got a chance to kind of talk to him and pick his brain a little bit. And it was good.
Yeah. That you can get a lot of information. I do that when I go to seminars and there's a special speaker up there. I'll wait for everybody to get the fanfare, and then you catch them later and, hey, you want to go to coffee?
Yeah.
A lot of times they will, and then you find out they're really good information. That's kind of the basis of when I started T4 Tactics. I took some train the trainer classes for active shooter training. And I wasn't really on board with that. So I decided to start going out whenever there's an attack. I'll go out to the location and actually meet with victims, survivors, witnesses, law enforcement, take them to coffee, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And so I've been to 16 of the worst attacks we've had, and 97 people interviewed. And it's always the same thing. We never thought that person would do that. I never thought it would happen here. I hear that all the time, and consistently. And then what a calm look the shooter or shooters had on their face. It's just amazing. So that's my basis, is I get all my information straight from primary source, evidence-based, people that were there. And it's just amazing. And a lot of times the part of the healing is talking about the incident. Some people don't want to. I don't want to talk about it. But some people, I'll tell you everything. And you can see the healing where they're talking about it and they're getting it off their chest. Same with law enforcement. Law enforcement will talk about it.
It's kind of interesting, because I agree with you. I do think it is healing, but at the same time, it's almost like, I think sometimes when you're going over stories of stuff that happened at churches, like we've had a few humdingers of situations that happened at my church where you just kind of scratch your head and you're like, oh my goodness, this, this happened. I wouldn't have believed that. But at the same time, being able to talk with someone about it, it gives you a good opportunity to kind of rehearse in your mind, did I do everything that I was supposed to?
Right.
And how am I, I think we have to kind of justify in our minds. We have to, play through, okay, could I have done something different?
Right.
And I don't know.
And I think it's important to debrief, if something goes sideways in a church, maybe it's not violent, maybe it's just a verbal confrontation. I think it's great for the safety or security team, whatever you call it, to do a debrief and say, we're not here to point fingers. We're not here to hurt feelings, but what could we have done better? What went wrong? What went right? Because you don't want to make that mistake again, and it goes worse than what it did.
For sure.
I think that's important.
For sure.
We're not pointing fingers at people, but we're just talking. Let's just do a debrief. We did it all the time at the police department. We'd have a critical incident. We all meet at shift change and let's talk about it, get it out, and let's fix any problems.
Yeah. I grew up in New England, and quite a bit before I moved to Columbus, I worked with the fire department, fire and EMS, and we were out in a small community, and of course that was a long time before we had PTSD as a term.
Right.
Because everybody was like, okay, you know what? Just, pull up your bootstraps, go do the next day. Right.
Exactly.
And so, but what was always interesting to me was we would do the same thing. We would sit there when something big happened in the community that really impacted, I think we had one time, and certainly I'll never forget it, but we had one situation where a young man decided to commit suicide, and he ended up shooting himself. And I was one of the first people there with the ambulance as an EMT, and we were still waiting for the scene to be secured by law enforcement, because it was, there was a firearm involved and we didn't really know what was going on. And I think the closest officer that they had that was responding was about 20 miles away. And it was actually a state trooper that, was responding. And
that's a long time.
It is.
When the scene is hot, even a mile away, when you got backup or law enforcement a mile away, that's a long time. Things can happen.
Well, this was a community where everything shuts down after 5. So the closest officer was 30 minutes away by normal drive. And they ended up making it. We ended up calling life flight for the young man. And unfortunately, he didn't make it. But after that, one of the department mandates was, we brought counselors in from the hospital, and that was unusual back in the day, because we got called in, all of us that were on the scene and that assisted with that, and we thought we had done something wrong, and we're like, okay, are we all going to get fired? What happened?
Right.
And the chief was like, no, I think you guys did a fantastic job. I wouldn't have changed anything. Your response was, on point, the best
Yeah, good.
anybody could have. But they said, we just want you guys to each take the time to talk through this situation with the
Right.
counselors, because, of how therapeutic it is to kind of chat and, kind of get that off your chest. So
It's important. It's very important to talk about it. Whenever you're ready to talk about it, it's very important to talk about it. Yeah. If we hold it in, that's where we start getting depression that could lead to suicide or drug or alcohol abuse. So I'm glad they did that for you guys. It's so important to bring in counselors, and it helps.
Go ahead.
If the counselor you're speaking to especially has a fire department or rescue background, it helps even more. Just like from the police department side of it, if you get a counselor in that has a police or law enforcement background, it's like, wow, you can relate. But if not, it can be tough, and cops tend to turn their back on if it's not their own. Same with firefighters. It's now we're in our little world. Yeah, I get it. I understand that.
I think honestly, and we have a good friend of mine. In fact, I actually had lunch with him today. He's a pastor of a church. He was actually just asked to be a chaplain for one of the local departments, and he and I were kind of talking about that. And he was pretty surprised to be asked, but he gets along very well with a lot of the officers. And so the police chief reached out to him, and he actually told him, I think it was 5 or 6 months ago, he said, hey, I want you to pray about this and consider becoming a chaplain, because he said, we really want to bring somebody back into the department. And I guess the department hadn't had a chaplain or counselor for, gosh, I don't know, almost 100 years. And so
I'm glad they brought him back.
Yeah, the chief was like, you know what, we're changing some stuff up, and we want to, we want an individual that can be a part of us and is involved in the community and support our officers. And that pastor asked me, he's like, you've been involved with public safety and law enforcement and stuff. And he said, what would be like the one thing that, you would tell me to do? Like, cause I don't know. He's like, I've never been in public safety. And I said to him, I said, you know what? I said, I'll tell you 2 things. And he's like, what 2 things are you going to say? And I said, listen and time. And he just kind of looked at me, and I said, well, for starters, I said, time is they need to get to know you. They need to trust you. They're not going to just open up the instant you walk in and get sworn in. And I said, for listening, I said, you have to realize that not every conversation that you have is a problem that needs to be solved. Sometimes you just need to let them talk and communicate, because I said, you're going to be on scenes where the worst thing has happened. And as those officers respond, the best thing that you can do is support them and, and listen and be that filter and certainly the avenue for them to clear their minds with, being available to them and that sort of thing. So I think he'll do a fantastic job, because he's very much like that. But
yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm glad they're doing that. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of departments in the area are starting to go back to doing that, because they see and understand that, it's a great resource for folks. But anyhow, shifting gears to go back to the pre-attack indicators, let's chat about that for a little bit. So for those of you that are listening, I'm going to post in the show comments and the show notes. There's a few different things that I found with the FBI as far as statistics and different things that they put together. And if you're interested, you're welcome to go on their website and download it. I thought it was pretty fascinating, but they actually broke down and analyzed cases between 2000 and 2013. and came up with some of the major causes, which we've said it. I know I've said it to churches and law enforcement that, the FBI basically said that one of the most major stressors, 62% of the active shooters were basically stressed out with mental health concerns. And I know coming back from COVID, that's been, certainly it's probably a higher percentage than that now too. But it's always interesting to me to go back and kind of look at the consistencies between different events, and there's really no, I don't know, specific profile that fits every active shooter in every,
Right.
Every situation. But at the same time, understanding some of the stressors and certainly, different indicators and things like that can certainly make us better prepared to, to address or even investigate further. It's not always about necessarily calling someone out for their actions or having a mental health situation. But sometimes, especially in church settings, sometimes I found that even just going up to someone and kind of talking to them, if you think maybe their social cues are a little off, sometimes that can make a big difference too.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And we don't, like when we talk about pre-attack indicators, we don't want anybody on the team to be the pre-attack indicator. So like our safety team, I've trained a lot of churches, and I see people that, the pre-attack indicator is that person right there, because they can't talk to people, or they
Right.
can't they can't stay calm. They're a loose cannon. So I mean, that could be the most, sometimes I say obvious, but maybe it's unintentional blindness that this pre-attack indicator is right in front of us, because somebody comes in upset or with problems, and we don't know how to. You and I have a mutual friend, John Riley, with General Response, and he does an amazing job and with de-escalation techniques. And so we have to make sure that that threat in that pre-attack indicator is not right in front of us on our own team. Not that they're going to attack us, but they're going to. They could fuel somebody that comes in.
For sure.
And I think that's probably one pre-attack indicator we got to start looking at. But yeah, humans will send out a lot. I found through my research that most active shooters they feel like they're victims. Not a lot of them are nutcases. Not a lot of them are violent people. They're people like you and I, and they felt like they've been done wrong. So maybe the church hasn't treated me the way I should. The church hasn't given me money. West Freeway Baptist Church, they were helping him out. This is the headshot where the guy was taken out after he killed two
Jack
ushers.
Wilson.
But but they, he was in that church, and he's asking for food and clothing, and they're giving it to him, and shelter, and he asked for money, and the pastor said no, and that set him off. He didn't like that. Pre-attack indicator for that one would have been the way he was dressed, the disguise. That's a pre-attack indicator. But there was a kid in British Columbia 7 years ago, and he wrote a poem. The teacher told the class to write a poem. This kid writes a poem, and basically it says, sinking into bed, homicide thoughts filling my head, homicide or suicide or homicide. I don't know what he's talking about. Into sleep, he's thinking. And then he says, why me? I'm thinking. Suicide or homicide or suicide. He doesn't know. But that why me is at that particular case, and he ended up killing a teacher and a custodian, but that why me could be a pre-attack indicator. There's that feeling of I'm a victim, why me? And he's talking about suicide or homicide, and he mentions why me. So we have to watch out for people that are asking for help or feeling like they're being attacked. There's people that have done active shooter attacks that have gone in and killed their boss or the HR manager because they're being targeted because they're not doing their job. And some active shooters, there's been two that I know of that walked in, killed the boss, and went right back to work at the assembly line because they don't know the difference between reality and fantasy. You can't do that. We know that, but you can't do that. But the pre-attack indicator there was clear that, you're picking on me, and I'm mad because maybe I've come to this church. We'll talk about churches, but maybe I've come to this church for so many years and I'm getting a divorce and my wife and kids are staying here and I've been kicked out because of a protective order or injunction or something like that. And we have to think about if in that situation, a man or a woman, whoever be the spouse, sends a text message says, I'll get you no matter where you're at. The church is no matter where she's at. So when we talk about people, there's a lot of indicators that people will give out. It can be hands in the pocket. It can be clenching of the fist or jaw. You can sometimes see somebody's jaw grinding in their underneath their skin on their jaw. If they're upset and they're just grinding their teeth, they're mad. That could be an indicator. We can have body language. You might be talking to somebody that's a little bit upset in the church and you've got their arms crossed like this, and then they put their arms on their hips. So they've changed body language. Or maybe they've got their arms on their hips and they stand like this, or they take a defensive stance. You might see pacing or fidgeting, really nervous because they're getting ready to do something. You could see eye contact. You've got eye contact and then you lose it. Or you're talking to them and trying to de-escalate and they're looking down here and all of a sudden they look at you and give you that look. That's eye contact. We may have the rooster stance. So Daytona had a lot of bars. And as a cop, we respond to bar fights, and it's drink one beer. You got liquid courage. You're going to fight the police. You're going to fight the bouncers, everybody. And we get there, and I call it the rooster stance. Everybody's got their chest, pumped out. Look how tough I am. So that could be a pre-attack indicator as well. Is I'm trying to make look big because I'm getting ready to attack you. You might have disruptive behavior, challenging behavior, hands in the pocket. I like to tell church safety teams, watch those hands. It's a little bit harder for me to attack you if I'm talking with my hands or my hands are right here. But when I put my hands in my hoodie or when I put my hands in my pocket, can't see the hands. That could be accessing something. That leads to target glancing or indexing. If I'm walking up to someone, I'm having a problem with them, and I'm indexing, I put my hand in my pocket because I have a gun or a knife, and then I bring my hand out. I put my hand back in my pocket. When I was in the drug unit, we could sit on the corner, and we'd watch 5 or 6 guys on the corner selling crack, and we'd be able to figure out who has the money and who has the gun and who has the crack because they're touching it. They're constantly touching it. So we'd say those 3 are our targets right there, because the same guy usually doesn't carry the gun, the crack, and the money in case they're arrested. They don't want to lose everything. But you can tell because they'd be touching it. We got to watch for indexing too. If I'm in the pastor's office and we're being counseled and things aren't going good, or he's telling me something that I don't like, I may look at his scissors on his desk and look back at him and look at his scissors on his desk. That's called indexing, target glancing. There's a chance that maybe I'm thinking about grabbing those scissors and attacking him with them, or a stapler. But people will look at it first. It's like the bad guys. Before they run from the police, they're going to look this way. They got a warrant out for them, or they got drugs in their pants or in their shoes, and they're going to look this way. What they're doing is they're setting themselves up. Okay, if I run that way, I got to run over a car, and then there's a chain link fence that I got to jump. They need to know that. So those are along the lines of some pre-attack indicators. Heart rate. If you're talking to somebody and they're getting ready to make a move on them, a lot of times in the carotid artery, you can see that. Bam, bam, bam. You know that from being in the fire department. You can see it in their. I've seen it in their chest before. You can see their shirt rising. The rapid heart rate. Something may be getting ready to happen. You might have pacing or fidgeting. I think we talked about that. I'm trying to keep my notes so I stay on track. Fighting
the pacing and the from the heart palpitations and pacing, sweating, lockjaw. I mean, we've had folks come in. In fact, a few years ago, we had an individual come into our church that was doing that. Like, he went in sweating profusely. He had this huge long overcoat on. He goes in, he sits down in the back of the sanctuary, and then gets up, walks out of the building, and starts angrily pacing back and forth outside the building on a cell phone. And, the conversation got to the point where people could hear him inside the church yelling on the cell phone. And it turned out he ended up leaving. We asked him, kind of coached him through and got him to leave early. But what was interesting was it turned out that we did a little bit of a background check on him, and he was very well known with local law enforcement for creating issues and actually going to churches and causing a disturbance. So we kind of ended up being able to head it off before it actually happened at our church by talking to him. But really just kind of pulling him aside, myself and actually one of the other team members, who was a deacon, actually pulled him aside and said, "Hey, let's talk about this. Are you okay? Because you seem really, irritated and frustrated. Is there something we can talk to you about?" So even just seeing those pre-attack indicators before and putting together, I always tell people it's kind of like putting together a puzzle. Like when you get certain pieces at some point in time, you see the big picture. And so, it's like, okay, so before you get to that point of seeing the big picture, let's isolate, the person or bring them, away from everybody else so that we can address it.
Right.
For sure.
And you may get somebody that sits in the sanctuary, walks out and comes back in. That could be a pre-attack indicator. Or using the phone. They came into the church to check things out. Hey, I don't see a lot of security in here, so I'm going to make a phone call. There's a lot of when Roe versus Wade was overturned, there was a lot of young ladies that were going in overcoats, trench coat, long coats, and they would sit in church and then all of a sudden pop up improperly dressed. But all around the church, there are people filming them. They're together and they're filming them. They want that church safety or security person to come up and grab them. And now they're going viral with that video. Could be calling friends, returning. You may be talking to somebody and they've got a backpack and they set it down. That could be a simple pre-attack indicator that I've just set my backpack down because we're getting ready to go fist on fist. So just indicators we have to watch for. Threats can come from a lot of different ways. Threats can come direct threats, social media, verbal. They can come, somebody could write something on the bathroom wall. They could come through a text message. They could be implied, oh yeah, boom, or something, so there, a lot of it is, I always say, and I know you guys have said it, we hear it all the time. If your gut tells you, God gave us the ability to profile people. He did. And we're not talking about skin color or where they come from in the world, but we as humans, we can look at somebody and say, that's not right. There's something off with that. And we have to go with our gut feeling on that. That's our best defense for pre-attack indicator, is look at somebody and say, that's not right, and let's investigate it. Don't turn your back on it. We don't want to keep putting ourselves into anomalies, which is that's pre-attack indicator, but it's nothing.
I want to go back real quick. You mentioned when you were going through a few of your things, one of the first things you mentioned was social media, and I kind of want to circle back to that, because it seems like a lot of churches that I've had the opportunity to talk to really don't put a lot of value in social media. Like they haven't gotten to that point yet of saying, okay, if I go on my Facebook account or Instagram or Twitter or whatever account I'm using and post what's on my mind, that might connect somehow back to my actions at the church. And so we've had a lot of situations where something didn't seem right in person. And then we went online while that was going on. We went online to the person's Facebook account and saw some postings that made what we passed off as, this isn't really important, it's not a big deal. All of a sudden, when you connect it with that social media post, it's like, whoa, wait a second here. That adds a little bit more depth to.
Now it's a pre-attack indicator. Now it's a threat.
Exactly.
I think just about a vast majority of active shooters they can't help but put something out, whether it's a manifesto, it's a text message, it's social media. I don't think, and I've researched this one a lot. I actually went out to Vegas. I don't think the Vegas shooter at the concert in October. I don't think he put anything out on social media. I don't think he told anybody. That was a complete surprise. But yeah,
Sure.
social media is very important to monitor. If somebody's going through a nasty divorce and they're going through your church and it's really bad, or that somebody from the nursery has turned in one of the parents for neglect on the child that comes in, and there's a lot of different types of neglect. It could be it's wintertime, it's snowing, and the kid's coming in with no coat on, or the kid's hungry, or sexual abuse, physical abuse. And it could be that we've called Department of Child Protective Services, and now the church is targeted because we did the right thing. So we need to monitor social media and look at that and say, let's just kind of look at this guy and see if he's going to post something on social media that could attack the church. Another thing that I wanted to mention about while we're on social media is, don't live stream the service. Delay it 10 or 15 minutes. Sutherland Springs Baptist Church, he was very proud that he did that attack. They killed those 26 people while they were live streaming it. Governor Abbott in Texas has a hold, and I hope the hold is still valid, has a hold on that where law enforcement can't release it because we don't want that making it to YouTube or social media. But if we can delay the feed by 15 minutes, now it's not appealing for them to come in. Or if we delay it, let's do the service, then an hour later, let's put the service up there. But these violent attackers, they want that shock value. Boom.
That was one of the things that actually right after Sutherland Springs happened, I actually went to the video creative director at my church, and I said, "Hey, do you have a few minutes? Can we sit down and talk about this?" And he's like, "Yeah, what's up?" And I said, what would happen if we had someone come in? Like, is there a delay on our feed? Because we do that.
Right.
Like, we stream at the time we streamed it live. And he's like, "Yeah, let me show you." So they actually incorporated like a 10-minute a 10-minute delay. And I said, I'm like, "That's fine. That's great. I appreciate you doing that. But is there a way that we can be prepared to go to another screen? Like, say someone comes in and disrupts stuff because they want the attention, because they know we're doing live things. Can we switch to another screen and take a break?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely." So it was encouraging to me that they had thought through all of those aspects, and we agreed on it, and we were like, "This is perfect." But yeah, that's something too. For the safety folks out there, the leaders, check in with your AV person and be aware of how that happens, because a lot of churches now will stream live and on the spot. And
even if it's not a violent attack, they may stand up and say, "Abortion, my body, my choice," or whatever. We don't want to give them that power of boom. We just had 5,000 people or 25 people see that. But yeah, we definitely want to delay that feed, and it can be done. There's software that'll do it. Or when church is over, church gets over at noon, start your feed at noon. But think outside the box. I'm glad you guys did that. It's good.
Yeah. And a lot of times, again, that's one of those things that it's kind of funny. It's like social media. Like, a lot of times churches will just kind of look at us like, "Well, why is that necessary?" Well, there was a church in St. Louis, Missouri. In fact, the pastor actually came to our last conference and spoke about the situation, but he was preaching, and a gang came in, and they actually had a gun fall out of their pocket. And so the safety team responded, and what they did was they actually shut some of the cameras down, and some of them they actually put on the gang, so that as they de-escalated the situation, they could actually see and have a record of the people. And from that standpoint, I was like, and then actually they turned that footage over to local law enforcement, who then, I think one of the detectives on the case actually connected it back to a string of local robberies, and they were able to prove that it was that guy that came in.
They're not the brightest ones.
No, but I mean, I was blown away. I was like, "That's awesome that you guys actually did that, and you were prepared," because oftentimes, even if we miss the pre-attack indicators, if we don't have a method of being prepared, anything can sideswipe us with, with the shock and awe piece of, you're just not like, if I wasn't prepared for someone coming in and disrupting the service, I wouldn't necessarily be looking for, someone to come in
Right.
and, a trench coat or something like that, because, we had the same concerns after Roe versus Wade was turned over. And I know quite a few churches that listen to, to our broadcast did as well. So
Yeah.
it's kind of
And while we're
interesting.
talking about cameras, every church safety or security guy or girl should have it Wi-Fi to their phone, every camera. Being on the SWAT team, it would be amazing if when we get on scene and there's something horrible happening inside a building, somebody comes up to me and says, here's my phone and here's all the camera feeds. You can see
Sure.
exactly where that bad guy is. That's a huge help. And that's just Wi-Fi. That's really easy if you have a camera system set up. A lot of times that's just giving them the app and the ability to look at that. But having the ability to give your phone to law enforcement and have law enforcement look, where is this guy or girl right now?
Yeah. That's one of
and
the
then other
things
pre-attack.
too. Oh, I was just going to say, that's one of the things, like, we, in the past, like, we've encouraged law enforcement to come into our church beforehand, and actually conduct officer training in the building so that they understand the layout. And so, the higher officers, if they ever had to roll on something like that, they could easily know, okay, when you're talking about the fellowship hall or the sanctuary, this is the area, this is the space, we know where this is.
Right.
And oftentimes acclimate like precinct officers to the layout of the building. And just,
Right.
we were open all the time where we would tell officers, hey, come by for a cup of coffee and we'll, just walk around the building, take a break.
That's
There's
great.
restrooms,
That's great. Yeah.
that sort
great.
of thing.
Cops love free food and free coffee. So they'll come out for any of that stuff. I always did. And then we got to number the doors. When we talk about a quick response, number the doors, put the number on the inside, on the bottom, in case there's a fire. When we're crawling, we know what door, but from a SWAT response or a tactical response, it's great to know, because I don't know if I go to a church, the church I was at in Baltimore today, I don't know north, south, east, or west. But I look at the door and I know that's number 27 door. And if I have to tell the police on the phone, he's come in door number 27, man, that speeds it up. That's so much faster.
That's actually something that we did. We had that years ago, we had that recommendation. And I was like, this is going to take a lot of work. I'm not sure if I want to do it. And so I pushed through, and I had to jump through a ton of politics and hoops to get,
I hear it with churches.
That. Yeah. And it was so funny because the first time that I needed to use them, I had to call an ambulance for a friend of mine's daughter who passed out. And immediately I said, we actually lettered all the doors. Well, in counting the doors on the outside of our building, we had 25 doors. And they don't know, just like you said,
just under 26,
right?
Alphabet.
But they didn't, like, they don't know what, same thing. Like I would say, well, come to the main door. Well, there's 3 sets of doors that look like they could be a main door. So when I called, I told the dispatcher, I said, could you please tell them to come to door K? And so the dispatcher was like, okay, thank you. We really, really appreciate that. Well, a battalion chief, who was actually a friend of mine, I looked up out in front of the building and he was at the intersection in front of the building. And as soon as I hung up with the dispatcher, I see his lights come on and he pulls into our parking lot. And I could see him actually reading his computer. And then he drove around the side of the building to where I was and pulled up and walked in. And so after they treated the individual and transported her, I asked him, I said, so when I saw you pull in, what were you checking? And he's like, well, I saw the address come up and I knew right away it was in front of me. But he said, when I went up through the notes, he said, I saw that the dispatcher put door K. And he's like, that just made, a night and day difference for us. And that was kind of for me. I was like, yes, score.
Thank goodness. Yeah. It definitely speeds up the response, and we want, if it's a medical emergency or a violent attack, we want that to come up. One more thing I want to mention about pre-attack indicators is if you have people protesting outside the church, a lot of times you can look at a group that's protesting. Antifa has different colors. They've got color codes that they'll wear, indicating what they do. Usually the leader, though, but you'll be able to watch the people that are protesting. You'll be able to look at them and figure out who the leader is. Watch that person. Have somebody that's on your team with a radio that's watching that person, because they're going to call the shots. Hey, let's move over to this side of the church, or let's breach the church. Get some bricks. Let's do this. But every group has an alpha, and every group has a leader. So in the case of a protest, pick out that leader, because that's going to be the one calling your shots, and you can kind of get an idea of where that may be going if you can pick out that leader or leaders. We had a
real quick to that point, and then we're kind of out of time, but we had a group of outreach folks that were going downtown Columbus when Antifa was running around quite a bit and protesting, and they were going to hand out bottles of water to the folks that were protesting, just to try and minister to them and that sort of thing.
Right.
And so one of my pastors was like, yeah, I'm going to go downtown. And I said, okay, if you're going downtown with all of this nonsense going on, I'm going to go with you. Like, I'm not going to let you go by yourself. So I went down there, and we were handing out water bottles to the state troopers and officers and folks down there. And, no one from Antifa came up to me. And I was like, I had set up like this little podium where I was giving water out, and hot, boiling, blazing hot day. Yeah. And no one from Antifa would come up and take a bottle of water to me. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this guy, this one guy, just like you said, the alpha. He grabs this microphone and he's talking, and all of a sudden he starts coughing. And he looks over to me, and I've got 2 bottles of water in my hand, and I held one up to him, and he like kind of does a double take. He walks over, grabs the bottle, drinks, downs the whole thing. And he's like, hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Turns around, walks away. And then every single other person came over. It was like he had to be the one,
the leader. Yeah. But you made a connection, and that's what we do. That's what your job was there to do. That's great. That's a great story. You made the connection, and in the back of his mind, he knows that you guys aren't on the same team, but you're willing to help him. You gave some water, and that's really what the church safety team or security team, whatever you want to call it, the ministry is all about. You get out there and you help regardless. Yeah. And
I think sometimes, and that's an awesome point, because I think sometimes we can lose focus of that, and we can just be like, well, we're guarding, we're securing, we're doing this, we're doing that. But the truth is, I mean, we do want to minister to the people that come in. And unfortunately, some of those folks may be, displaced in their thinking that, they want to be disruptive or do harm or whatever. But I do think that oftentimes, especially if it's someone that's familiar with the church, I've seen situations where someone walked in and I knew that they were in the middle of a divorce or a really bad disruptive situation at home. And they walked in like they were just so mad and laser focused, and it was just odd. And just taking the time to pull them aside and say, hey, can I pray with you? You look like you're a little bit, off the, I don't want to be rude, but it's like, you look like your mind isn't where it should be, and you're kind of storming around. You're obviously frustrated and upset about something. Can I take a few seconds and pray with you? Is there something I can listen? You can talk to me about, and a lot of that, you're right. I mean, it's a lot of it goes back to kind of de-escalation from, that point of just being aware. But
And just doing that to somebody, there's no telling. You'll never know what you stopped that person from doing possibly in the future. Just that one positive contact, we'll never know. A lot of times if we're nice to people, we'll never know for the rest of our lives, what did I stop that person from possibly doing just because I was nice? And I showed him that our church is welcoming. There's no telling what you could have saved that day from him maybe planning something. Yeah,
for sure.
Just be nice. Be nice and smile.
That's
now. What was in the water? What did you guys spike the water or something? Visine or anything to the Antifa guys? No, but we'll talk off air. You can tell me.
Yeah, that's funny. No, we didn't do anything like that. And even law enforcement, like some of the state troopers, because we were actually at the Capitol building, and I know one of the officers who's a sergeant with the troopers with the highway patrol at the Capitol building. And, when we left, even the officers, like they knew when we first walked up, it was the same thing. Like the officers were like, no, whether that's sealed or not, I don't want to take that water.
Exactly. I'm always careful with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then by the time we went to leave, they were joking around with us and they knew, oh, hey, you're from this church. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So again, it was building the relationship with everybody there. Like we weren't, I didn't necessarily agree with the protesting, but it's it was their right to protest. And that's what I told the officers. I said, they're not doing anything damaging. They're not destroying anything. They have a permit to protest. So we're just here trying to be supportive of everybody and help everybody. We just have water to hand out,
Yeah, we're just neutral. We're here handing. That's why we live in America. Why we live in the United States is we can peacefully protest. Yeah, and it's good you guys were there being neutral and just keeping people safe, keep them hydrated. Yeah,
for sure. Well, we are officially out of time, but again, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight and talking about this. It's been great. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Good talking to you.
All right. So wrapping up real quick, thanks for hanging out with us, and you'll be able to access this recording on our podcast platforms probably tomorrow. And if you watch it on YouTube or watch it on the podcast platform, make sure to click like and subscribe. That always helps us with the algorithms. And it also notifies you when we have new content, which is usually about every week. So as always, we're here to help you with your church and your ministry, and anything we can do to help you, we're happy to do that. Our website is churchsafetyguys.com, and you can reach out to us through that or through the Church Security app, which is downloadable on the iOS or Google Store platforms. And again, we appreciate you supporting our ministry to help places of worship and churches. If there's a topic in the future that you would like us to chat about, or maybe bring a guest on to talk about that would benefit you, please reach out to us and let us know, because we're happy to do that. So until next time, take care. God bless. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast, brought to you by Vigilant Impact. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback and interaction. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams, join the discussion online, and connect with us on social media or at our website at churchsafetyguys.com. For other great ministry resources, download the Church Security app. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and semper disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.